Bonjour, buenas noches, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you, and welcome to this exclusive live webcast on the HR business partner in the new world of work. Now, the HRBP's role has evolved more than ever in the past 2 years, and with this program, we will focus on three key levers that the HRBP can use to create greater value and impact through a transition to a new way of working in this fast-moving world that we're in. Those levers are leading the redesign of work, reskilling the HR for the new world of work, and reconfiguring the organization in the new world of work. Sounds pretty interesting, doesn't it? My name is Cindy Scholz, and I'm your host for today. I am an L&D manager for the BeNext team of People Matters, and it is my privilege to welcome Saurabh Nigam for this exclusive webcast. So Saurabh leads Omidar Network India's human resource function and is responsible for recruitment, internal culture development, and employee engagement initiatives. He also supports Omidar Networks India's investors in their people agenda with a focus on organization, design and change management, talent management, and executive coaching. Saurabh has over 15 years of experience working in early to mid-stage organizations across retail, financial services, IT, ITES, and e-commerce industries. Previously, Saurabh worked at Snapdeal as the Senior Vice President of HR, and before that, he worked as Vice President at Baru, where he led strategic HR practices and built a responsive team of HR professionals. A warm welcome to you, Saurabh. I'm so excited that you're joining us today.
Thank you, Cindy. An absolute pleasure to be here.
Okay, great. The format for today's webcast will be a fireside chat, so to speak, where Saurabh and I will have an informal conversation about some of the tools and methods to promote certain cultural norms, behaviors, and beliefs, as well as explore the link that exists through an HRBP to drive market success. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know where you're joining from. I won't be able to see that myself, but my miracle workers behind the scene will keep an eye on it. And if you have any questions and we have any time left, we will make sure to ask them as well. If not, we'll save the questions for one of our live sessions during the program, so no questions will go to waste. Now, the topics we'll discuss today and many more obviously are addressed in great length in our 5-week cohort-based certification program, which begins on September 20th. And there's a lot of ground to cover on this subject. So if you're ready, Saurabh?
Absolutely, I'm ready to go.
Brilliant. All right, first question. An important question a lot of business leaders and HRBPs ask is, how do we figure out what will work for each organization's distinct culture, values, and missions?
Sure. Right. So I'm going to actually break this down into two parts, right? I mean, there's a question which possibly should be the starting point of getting every some group of people together, whether we call it a team or an organization. And the way I look at it is that if you're bringing some people together in a particular team or in an organization, you need to really define why are we coming together, what do we stand for, and that's really what mission or vision is all about, right? So why have we come together? What is it that we're trying to achieve? Does that inspire us, as a group to go after and achieve that? And I think defining that to the T really boils down to figuring out the mission and the vision of the organization or the team, right? So to me, it's a very fundamental or a basic question, but I think it's a very important critical question, because if you want those men and a group of men and women to rally around each other and achieve something significant, you need to define what that is, right? And why are you coming together? So to me, that's really how you define your mission and vision. Important is that once you are able to articulate that, that's where the culture part comes in, and which really boils down to that recognizing what are the ways of working for us as a group, as a team, right? What would be okay for us and what would not be okay for us as we go about achieving that objective of ours, which we are defined in our mission. And I think defining them and articulating them, those ways of working and what's okay and what's not okay for our group, is really the starting point of building a strong culture. It obviously is not going to get evolved overnight. it's an iterative process. But I also believe that that iterative process will happen only when you start calling these ways of working which you have articulated in every possible at every possible opportunity, whether it is when you're hiring someone new, your talent management rewards, recognition program. But the only way to embed a culture in a team or embed a strong culture in team once you've defined what your ways of working is to make sure that you live it. And the only way to live it is to bring them up front in every single interaction which you're having within yourself, within your team, and even with external stakeholders. That's how I really look at how you go about defining your unique culture and mission vision for your team, for your organization.
Mission, vision, and culture, and live it. Like you said, if you live it all the time, then everybody knows what the values are, where we're going. Brilliant. All right. Second question on this. What could we do to better engage all employees in order to achieve success? How do we do that? How do we start that if we're not there yet?
Right. So to me, any person in your team in a team will be engaged if you're able to answer these four basic fundamental questions for every single person in your team. And what of those are, right? I mean, we obviously in our previous question we described that what do we stand for as a team, right? So I think the fundamental question which any team member will have in his or her mind is, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to achieve? What are my goals and objectives? And how do they align to my team or organization's goals and objectives? So that to me is, and having that clarity is very important if you want to have someone engaged with you in your team, right? I mean, you don't want someone to be totally clueless and directionless that what am I doing here? So to me, that's the starting point. The second question which I feel needs to be answered for every single person in the team is, do I have the right resources to achieve my goals and objectives, right? So yes, you've made it very clear that, hey, this is what you need to do. And you need to run 100 meters in 10 seconds, say, right? But do I have the right resources? Do I have the shoes to run those 100 meters in 10 seconds or not? So that's the second one, right? Have you provided the right resources to your teams? Third one, are you providing timely feedback and recognition to your team members as they go about achieving their goals and objectives, right? So feedback and rewards goes hand in hand, right? Are you doing that, and are you doing that enough? And the fourth one, fourth question, which you really need to answer for every person in your team is, are you providing opportunities for learning and growth to your team members as they go about doing their work and achieving their objectives, right? So if really what I'm trying to say here is that if you're able to articulate very clearly to an individual or what he or she needs to do and how it aligns with the team's goals and objectives, do they have the right resources, give them feedback, recognize for the work which they do, and ensure that they're learning and growing as individuals in the process. I think you're going to have a fairly highly engaged team in place. So to me, that's really how you go about it. Everything else you do around it, really should add up to it, right? So there's a reason why I didn't call out engagement activities. The reason wherein I didn't call about connect sessions and things like that, which you do, because to me, ultimately, all of that should align with one or more of the answers to these questions.
And it sounds so easy, really, if you put it like that. I know it's not, but I know that I don't want to take shortcuts, but it really does sound easy. If the company has a goal and the employee knows what the goal is and what his or her own goal is, has the resources to do it, has the right shoes to run, gets the feedback, gets the reward, the prize at the end, and opportunities to learn and develop further. It sounds easy peasy to me.
And then I
Okay.
dare say, Cindy, right? Because and I say this because on the back of looking at data either through these surveys and the pulse checks, including exit surveys, and if you really drill down on that data point, I dare say that you will be able to zero down on reasons for exit. I'm just using exit as an example here, to one or more of these questions. Actually, that's the reason I'm bringing these four forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliantly at that. Thank you. All right. So, next question. In your opinion, what are the need to learn skills for an HRBP to
Sure.
continuously grow and add value to the company? Because I think that's once you've established something, in today's world, you're never done, right? It's
Yeah.
not okay. This is I've reached this level. This was where I was going. I can sit here for the next 10 years now
Right.
and not change anything.
Right. So HRBP, HR business partnering, and I'm going to talk about four skills which I feel are sacrosanct, which are really absolute must for someone to be a good, successful HR business partner. And obviously, it starts with your ability to understand the business and its dynamics, right, and how it is changing, how it is evolving, and most importantly, be proactive about it. You have the ability to see into the future. What are our business prospects? What are the implications of environmental, societal, political changes on our business, and the implication of that on people and people strategies, right? I use a proactive here because as a business partner, you're really partnering if you're proactive. If you're going to be reactive to the needs of the organization or needs of your business, you're missing the plot. So to me, your ability to look into the future and the business dynamics and implications of on business due to various factors, and play it back to what would it mean to your people and people strategies is number one. And that's a continuum. As you rightly said, it doesn't stop, right? Because business keeps evolving, right? The environment keeps changing, and I'm going to come to what we have seen in last 1.5 years, the extraordinary times we have been living in. The second one is, I think it's very commonsensical, but your ability to connect with people is the second skill. And more importantly, and I say it's a common sense because everybody talks about it, but to me, the most important factor around your ability to connect with people is your ability to connect with people who do not come from the same or similar background as you come from, who have very different thought process, who have very different things which motivates them, for that matter, right? As an HR business partner, I think you should have the ability to walk that difficult line wherein you're keeping your own perspectives and thoughts and values on one side, but you're able to understand what the other person is bringing to the table, because that's when you're going to be truly be partnering with your business. So your ability to connect with people irrespective of the background or the thought process or the culture they come from is the second one I'm going to talk about here. Third one is problem solve, and third and fourth I'm going to say it together because I'm going to use the same example to explain that. You should be adaptable and you should have the ability to problem solve, and no better example than what we have seen in last 18 months of this pandemic, right? I mean, nobody knew what is going to hit, what is hitting us in say March, April 2020, right? Businesses were taken by surprise, and that's where and obviously I don't think my first point will figure in here that in Jan 2020 you should have seen what's coming up. Obviously that was next to impossible, but March, April 2020, your ability to adapt to this changing scenario, changing environment, these extraordinary times which pandemic was bringing in, and therefore what are going to be the repercussions around our ways of working, the people strategy, their motivations, all of that should have started coming together, and that's where your problem solving and adaptability starts coming in, right? How do you adapt to these changing scenarios, and you make sure that your organization is able to these situations from a people perspective, really would define how great HR business partner you're going to be.
Yeah, I love that. So could I sum that up by saying you have to understand the business and the strategies and the prospects, connect with different people. I really like that one because it kind of puts the emphasis on, if we're only surrounded by people that are just like us, we're never going to learn
Yep.
anything new or see stuff in a different perspective, right? So connect with different people and specialize in resilience and problem solving. I think that was what your last point came down to, that you need to know what to do in a bad situation, but also how to bounce back from it if everything like it did this. And I do love that how this past year or 2 years actually, we were so in the same boat together that we all wanted to learn from each other, because none of us knew in the beginning where we were going and how we were going to get there and how we were going to survive it. And turns out that I think we're a lot more resilient, all of us, than we thought we were. So good news there. Okay, so next question. How can a new work model like the ones we're talking about balance the requirements of both employees and employees?
Sure.
employees and employers. Sorry.
No worries. So, I mean, it's a given, right? I mean, we have seen enough and read enough about the fact that, the ways of working, the work model is going to change, is already evolving. The hybrid possibly is the way of future and things like that. So I'm not going to go and beat around the same thing again. How it helps, clearly it helps employees from the perspective that there is a better possibility of you able to manage work and personal priorities without getting bogged down by the location and the complexities involved with location, right? So, and when I say complexities involved with location, it could be schooling, it could be kids care, parents care, and so on and so forth, right? I mean, the hybrid model just gives you that much more a better handle or control over balancing these two priorities. So clearly works for employees in that manner. For employees, it's a given, right? I mean, ultimately, what it boils down to for the employees is that you need to have, as you asked me in your previous question, engaged employees, because engaged employees are definitely more productive. There's no doubt about it, right? So, and if when are people going to be engaged? When they're able to take care of their multiple priorities, which we all have, in a rightful manner, right? So, it's a given. However, one point I would like to really point out when it comes to hybrid work model, and or if these two things have to evolve, wherein both employers and employees have a win-win situation for themselves, is really understanding the implications of hybrid work around your own ways of working. I started this conversation by saying that really the culture is about ways of working. How do you operate? How do you work? What is okay and what's not okay? The moment you change that, and we are changing that, we are in the middle of changing how our way, how our model or the way future of work is going to look like by going into this hybrid model. One needs to figure out that what are the implications of our ways of working, right? And the point I'm trying to make here is that until 15 or 18 months back, until pandemic hit us, right, whether we like it or not, there was a certain homogeneity in the environment in which all of us were working on in rather, right? And that homogeneity was defined by the office space, right? All of us were under the same roof, and therefore, because there was homogeneity in the environment in which most of us were working in, right, you could have a certain ways of working, right? You could walk up to a person and say, hey, you know what, I need to bounce off something with you, right? Or you could just say, okay, let's catch up. Or you could have water cooler conversations, right? If you're suddenly going to talk about a hybrid model where bulk of your organization is going to be remote, or most of the time is going to be remote working, many of these ways of working are going to become redundant, right? So I think it's very important for organizations to understand the implications of hybrid model on their ways of working, and then create ways of working which aligns with that hybrid model. Because otherwise, the advantages which I talked about, the fact that employees will have or may have the possibility of balancing their personal and professional needs and so on and so forth, will go out of the window. Just even to illustrate even more, one more example on that. So like, you could very well have a sales call or a all hands sales all hand when you were in the same environment, all of us being in the same office 18 months back at 10 in the morning, right? Suddenly, when we are working in the hybrid model, it's just not possible, right? Because working from home or working remotely is very different for a mother or father of two young kids, or a 25-year-old bachelor, right? So to assume that a 10 a.m. start to a sales call would be okay with everybody in a remote working or a hybrid working model, you're shooting yourself in the foot there, right? So this is a very simple example, but point I'm trying to make here is that as organizations, as leaders, and as HR business partners and HR practitioners, it's one thing to say we are moving into hybrid model, and hybrid model is not just about the fact that, hey, you can work from anywhere. Putting your thinking hats and figuring out how do my ways of working evolve, because that has a direct the advantages of hybrid working and the culture of the organization.
Yeah, I love how you say that. It doesn't, you don't know what the situation is at home. And when everyone's in the office, the situation is the same for everyone, right? It's everybody's there at that moment and should be available at that
Right.
moment. But once working from home, or having kids that are homeschooled, or um, other family members that are also working from home and being loud, and yeah, absolutely. Okay, so if you have any questions for Sarup, guys, please put it in the chat. We have a couple more to come, But if you have other questions, please feel free to put them in the chat for us, and we'll see if we can get to them. So the next question I have for you is, according to research, completely remote employees beat their never remote counterparts when it comes to high company contribution. What are your thoughts on this phenomenon? Because it's a phenomenon, obviously. We wouldn't have believed it 2 years ago, but
Sure. So I actually won't deny that, and I'm going to link it back to my previous question, right? So clearly, a completely remote team member of yours has the higher probability or probability of managing his personal and professional fronts in a much better manner than when you're not remote at all, right? But then again, I'm going to back to my previous answer. Whether that transpires on the ground or not will boil down to whether you've been able to change your ways of working. Most importantly, whether you've been able to change the mindsets, right, within the organization, within your team members, within leaders for that matter, because it's just not possible that you are suddenly working in a very different style or different model, but you're operating in exactly the same fashion. That so to me, if you're able to put a handle on your ways of working and the mindsets which exist in the organization, I have no doubt in my mind that a completely remote employee would be far better engaged and far more productive than someone who doesn't have that flexibility.
so it's about the mindset. You need to,
It's
both
about the
you
mindset.
and your employees have to have a changed mindset. Love that. Okay, next question. In the program, we detail this bridge to the future. So how can the HRBP assist in the implementation of activities to build practices that complement and empower employees?
Right. So, I mean, keeping in mind the fact that we're moving in very quickly, we're moving into this new way of working, the hybrid way of working. I think one of the first and foremost aspects of which an HR business partner can look at is, as I said earlier on, have a very keen eye on how have we been operating all this while, and what needs to change, right, in order to accommodate hybrid working, right? And I use that example, right? So if there is certain meeting cadence which exists in the organization, what are the implications on that, right? And how can we tweak that to accommodate this new ways of working? I think it starts with that, your ability to identify the areas, the pieces where your ways of working and the way your structure needs to change is the starting point. Second most important, I would say, is that I definitely believe there would be certain amount, in fact, a large amount of reskilling which will be required, not just for the HR business partners, but also for your team members, right? And just to give you an example, I know of an organization which employed large number of field sales force pre-pandemic, right? And which everybody suddenly became and they were into selling. They are into selling financial products, right? Everybody became remote. Everybody started working from home. The sales were still happening, but the difference being that the field sales was now thinking of, well, we're now going to do sales on telephones, on calls, right? Now, someone who's used to doing sales sitting in front of a customer, if you suddenly ask them to, hey, pick up the phone and speak to a customer and try and do the sales, it's a different ball game. One needs to recognize that, and it's a different skill set, right? So as HR business partners, understanding how the dynamics of your business is changing, and that's where the proactive understanding of changing dynamics of your business, implications of that on your people and people strategy. And one of the implications which I'm very convinced about is reskilling people. Is something which you should be very aware of, and be able to pinpoint and pick that up. Third and the final one I would say is, I talked about the fact your ability to connect with people, right? Your ability, and that doesn't go out of the window for you to be a successful HR business partner. Your ability to, now the added complexities around that is your ability to connect with people in a remote environment, right? And the onus is on you as a HR business partner to figure out ways in which, hey, you can't have a water cooler conversation. So how do you ensure that you're still connected with people, right? Over a Zoom call, over a telephone call, over a mobile call, and be mindful of the fact that if when you're ready to make a phone call, the other person sitting at home may or may not be ready, right? So how do you balance that out and figuring out? So honestly, I don't have all the answers because I'm figuring it out myself, but figuring out ways and means of ensuring that you remain connected with people irrespective of the geographies and the boundaries which have blurred is the third one, right? So to me, as HR business partners, you need to be able to do these three, if you have to survive and succeed in new ways of working.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And I love how you say that, connecting not only with your people, but connecting with your people in the hybrid way. I remember an example that came up a couple of weeks ago where we discussed, so, and that might be useful for our listeners, plan spontaneity, and it sounds like it's impossible, right? It's if it's planned, it's not spontaneity.
Absolutely.
But it absolutely works if you just,
It
you
does.
know, the first couple of times might be a little bit weary and a little bit difficult for everyone to say, okay, now we have to plan to be spontaneous. But it actually works instead of those water cooler sessions or
Right.
the coffee talks you have. To just plan it into your meeting and just say, okay, the
Yep.
first 15 minutes we're going to be doing the water cooler discussion, and we're going to talk
Yep.
about how everybody's weekend was or what everybody's dealing with, good or bad. And I love the reskilling as well, and that would immediately grab back to one of the things you said earlier about creating development opportunities. And I think that development opportunities for a hybrid are very, very much out there. There are
Yep.
so many things they can learn. I think by now, I remember the beginning of the pandemic, everybody was talking about, but I'm not technical enough for this. I was one of those people who said, I'm not very technical. I'm not sure. And now everybody, especially people in an older generation who got really worried and really nervous about all the technical stuff that would be involved,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
masters at technical now, because
Yeah.
every company that was even remotely uh, able to train their people in being technical. Everybody had sessions and trainings on how to do a Zoom, a WebEx, Microsoft Teams, whatever. So
Right.
reskilling and offering development opportunities. Brilliant one. I don't see any questions in the chat yet, but I have a couple. Oh, sorry. Did you want to add to that? Sorry.
Yeah, I just want to add one more point there, Cindy. Just building on what you said, I fundamentally believe, and I don't think it's an original thought. I'm sure I must have read it somewhere. Innovation happens when there are constraints, right? And we are in a constrained environment, whether we like it or not, since last 18 months, right? And I
Absolutely.
believe that this is an opportunity for us to innovate everywhere, and not just on including our people practices, right? So the example which I use, right? There was an opportunity for you to either say lay off your field sales force, because you're not going to have any field sales for next foreseeable future, or you reskill them into telesales, right? And as an individual who was into field sales, this is an opportunity for you to learn something new and be more productive about it, right? So to me, it was a pretty innovative thing which this organization did, wherein they just took up this 3 month a massive training intervention to reskill all the field sales force into telesales. And I'm sure whenever we are back to post-pandemic world, this will become one of the what should I say go-to or a best practice for them. Suddenly they've innovated because they were put into constraints. So the way to look at this is also that there are opportunities for us to innovate and come up with things which will last well into the future.
Yeah, brilliant and so true. Okay, I'm sorry I said there weren't any questions, but it turned out my chat wasn't really up to speed. So now I see all the questions, and we'll get straight through before we run out of time. So one of the questions is, how do we measure performance of mixed employees in a hybrid model, and draw the balance between employees in hybrid and when it comes to performance measurement?
Right. So I think before we even get down to measuring performance, and one of the aspects of a hybrid model as we are moving into it is has been the fact that you need to be very, very ruthless about what is priority for you as an organization, right? So I talked about the fact that you start with mission vision of the organization, which is really why are we here, right? And I think that question needs to be asked again: that why are we here and what are we trying to achieve? Keeping fully in mind the fact that you're going to be working in a certain model which is going to be different from the way you were working previously. Now the answer to that question could be that, hey, it's exactly the same thing which we're trying to achieve, what we were trying to achieve, say, pre-pandemic, right? Now if that be the case, depending on where you land in terms of what you're trying to achieve as an organization, what your goals and objectives are, it really boils down to how you're trickling it down to your teams in terms of what each individual, what different teams and what each individual role is in that journey of achieving those objectives. And then once you've defined that, I think measuring individuals against those metrics or goals and objectives, to me it's a fairly straightforward process. But to me, what is important is very rigorously figuring out, are there things which you need to reprioritize on your organization's goals and objectives, and translating that into your teams and individual objectives. Once you're able to do that, then I think it's the same process. I don't think anything else changes as far as reviewing the performance or measuring the performance of an individual. I definitely would not vote for the idea that there has to be a different yardstick just because someone is working in a remote setup, right? I think what you measure an individual against is what he or she's supposed to achieve, as long as you've made it very clear to that individual.
Yeah, and I totally agree. All right, next question. How can we as HRBP be proactive to curb the high attrition owing to the current scenario in the IT industry?
See, I think, okay, very difficult question to be honest, to answer this one, honestly speaking. I so wish that I had the answer to this one. Right, I think some amount of attrition is going to happen, right? I mean, and I'm assuming the person who's asked this question is India based right now, because I can possibly frame my answer in a in a more structured manner right now. Because see, in India, as far as the tech talent and IT talent is concerned, there is a clear gap between demand and supply, right? For good top quality tech talent, right? So the moment there is a gap between demand supply, there's a huge massive surge in the demand, and not just now but for last few years. And our institutions, when I say institution, not just educational institution but even the corporates, have not been able to keep pace with that, right? So when there is a demand supply gap, there is going to be churn, there is going to be attrition, right? So I don't think we can shy away from that, or we can walk away from that. What you can do is to make sure that you have done your part of the work well, which is, have you kept your people engaged? And just answered this sometime back, that what does keeping people engaged mean, which is really, what am I supposed to do? How does it align with my organizational goals, objective? Do I have the right resources? Am I being recognized enough? And am I learning and growing? More so for the tech talent, one of the fundamentals I've seen for tech talent in terms of attracting and retaining and motivating, keeping your tech talent motivated, is the magnitude of the problem which you're trying to solve through technology is what excites tech talent, is what I have learned over a period of time, right? So if the platform or the technology which you're trying to create is differentiated, is really complex problem you're trying to solve for, and you're trying to bring in a top quality tech talent to solve or contribute towards solving it, right? That engages them, right? But you need to ask yourself that, have you figured out that problem statement which will excite a top tech talent or not, right? So to me, you doing your side of the thing in terms of attracting the right talent by having the problem statement really nicely defined, the tech problem statement really nicely defined, and keeping them engaged by having the answers to those 4 questions, is what you need to do day in and day out, right? Will that bring that attrition to 0? I doubt, right, given the demand supply gap. But will it help you in keeping a major part of your talent retained? I would guess so. But that's the answer.
Well, you started this with saying, I wish I knew the answer, but it sounds like you have a pretty good idea there. That was brilliant. Okay, so tools and automation are taking over most of the operational tasks of HRBPs, is one of the comments, and followed by a question: where do mid-level HRBPs go from here? How do their roles evolve?
All right, so I actually disagree on the first part of the statement there, that tech tool and automation or technology for that matter are doing, taking away or making the roles of HRBPs redundant. No, I don't think so. What they're doing definitely is taking away the operational part of it, right? So, and which is a good thing, right? Because then the amount of time which you have to focus on the skills which I talked about, which is, be proactive about understanding the business dynamics and where it is moving, and foresee what are the things which you would need to do, or the implications of those changes on your people practices, or be adaptable about it, be your ability to connect with people more so in the hybrid ways of working, and be innovative about it. I personally feel that technology is actually going to help you focus your time on things which you should actually do to make yourself a more effective and efficient business partner. Now, if you don't do that, then obviously there is a problem, right? Then obviously there is redundancy kicking in, right? Because so I see this as an opportunity where you use the time which which is getting saved technology tools, which are and some
Yeah.
really, really powerful tools coming in, to then focus on building your capability and adding value to the business as the true business partner.
Yeah, you can use your time very wisely when all you need to do to get a hold of the data, for example, is literally push the button and get a look at the data, and you don't have to
Absolutely.
copy and paste and rewrite and everything, and yeah, and focus on the people.
So
I think
let,
I
yeah, sorry,
Go
just
ahead.
and I'd love to elaborate one, with one more example here, right? So I think the single biggest contribution you can make to the business as a business partner is when you're able to foresee the changes in the business and, as I said, replicate it or tie it back to people practices. So for example, right, so if your business is thinking of moving into a new geography or a new territory, right, and you see those happening in the strategic discussions, or the discussions which are happening at the leadership team, and so on and so forth, right? Your ability to understand that, does those new location or new geography have the right talent set? What would it take for you to get those kind of talent into the organization, to incubate business in a new geography? What would it cost to the business? And things like that. And be proactive about getting the answers to those questions and put them on the table as though that decision is being made, rather than working on it when the decision has been made. Because once the decision has been made, and I'm talking about, let's use the same example of going into a new territory, and then you start searching whether I'll be able to find the talent at what cost, and God forbid if it does not align or pushes you into a direction which tells you that, hey, you know what, we should not go into that direction. You're doing a great disservice to your business, right? So those are some of the things which you should be able to do, and the technology tools should allow you, or will allow you to on focusing on things like these.
Yeah, absolutely. Great addition to that. Thank you so much. The next question is how to create a hyper-personalized employee experience.
All right. I think it starts with your ability to understand, what are the different kind of employee segments you have, right? What moves them, what motivates them, what gets them going. Now that can change, or that can be different from. I mean, age is definitely one of the factors. Generations. I mean, we all have studied and read and heard a lot about different generations working together, and different generations get motivated by different kind of things. So that's one aspect of it. I also believe that many organizations are extremely heterogeneous in nature, right? So from a nature of work perspective, right? So you could have technology on one side and the customer service agents on the other side, working in the same organization. Now they're working in a very different environment, they're working in a very different setup and a context, and their ways of working is going to be very different. So your ability to understand, therefore, what is the context these folks are working, different people are working in different setups within the same organization, and then create, whether it is engagement, whether it is recognition, any kind of people practices aligned to those contexts of individuals working in the same organization, is really how to go about it. Which also means that I firmly believe that there will always be a macro culture in any organization, which is sacrosanct across the firm wide, and there will be microculture. There has to be microcultures, right? Especially in an organization which is large, which is heterogeneous. So your ability to define those microcultures, depending on the different contexts and different environments, different skills which people are bringing to the table for different kinds of work happening within the same organization, is really to go about creating personalized ecosystems for individuals.
Yeah, good advice. Good advice. Next one. How can an HRBP have a greater connect with employees, knowing the employee pulse, getting the red flags, etc., during such critical situations during virtual working conditions?
Cindy, for some reason, I couldn't understand that or hear the question completely. Could you just repeat that?
Yes, and it wasn't a very clear question because I fumbled. Sorry. How can an HRBP have a greater connect with employees, knowing the employee pulse, getting the red flags, etc., during such critical situations during virtual working conditions?
Right. Yeah, so we touched upon that, right? You got to be innovative about how do you maintain the connect with individuals, right? So now one of the things, a few of the things I can talk about are examples which I've seen happening in my colleagues, some of the things which I've tried out myself, right? So one very nice example you gave, right? I mean, it starts with calendarizing things for your own self, right? So I mean, I've been doing it for almost a year now, wherein I put these things in my calendar that to make sure that I'm touching upon, or I'm having these chats with every single person in the team at a certain frequency, right? And initially it will not come naturally because we're suddenly sitting virtually, right? So I've actually ended up calendarizing it for myself, right? So I'll put the name of the individual on the calendar and say, hey, you know what? I've not spoken to this individual for the last 2 weeks. I need to reach out. Now, how do I reach out to an individual will differ from person to person depending on what kind of relationship I share with that individual, right? So now that's again a skill which you need to develop, right? So how many people can you just reach out to by sending out a text message, right? And maybe there are certain people with whom you need to put a calendar invite in place. There's certain people with whom you need to be more formal, right? So, but that's something which you need to figure out, and you need to work on those relationships. Ideal would be, and the way I look at it is, if you really want to have the pulse of the organization, that you should be in a situation wherein you've developed those relationships that you can reach out to individuals whenever you want to, given provided the person has the bandwidth, right? But you need to work on it, right? So it starts with that. I mean, for me, it really started with putting solid calendar mechanism in place to make sure that I'm touching upon, or I'm reaching out to every single individual consistently, regularly, periodically, without missing out, without failing, right? So that's one. Second, I think, be very, very observant. Something which has really worked for me is observant on these calls, right? Zoom calls, or the video calls, or the even telephonic calls, and observant to the extent that observe these little hints of which may come up. Some of the examples I can give is that if you observe someone who who used to be very vocal and proactive about voicing out his or her opinion or asking questions on these calls, suddenly for last 2 or 3 calls has gone quiet, that's a red flag, right? Now you got to be observant about these things. So be observant, keep. I mean, I certainly believe that as HR business partner, it's important for you to observe, and when you're working in a virtual method, virtual mode, observing traits and then going deeper into it. So if you see some individuals who have suddenly gone quiet, reaching out to them and understanding if there's something amiss, right? Both on the personal and professional fronts is a great way of not just understanding the pulse, but also building confidence and trust in that individual. That, hey, you know what? Someone has my back. Someone is looking after me, right? So because otherwise this can derail very easily, right? Because you're on a video call or you're on a telephonic call and you just miss that hint that, hey, someone has gone quiet and hasn't been speaking for last 2 3 calls, and then you missed the boat, and then it just can spiral into something which much bigger, right? So that is the second way which I would say is a great way of maintain, or coming connecting with individuals and having the pulse of the organization. Third, I would say is ensuring that you're available, right? I mean, as much as I say that hybrid and flexibility around, I think as an HR business partner, being available to your teams and individuals, which may come at a constraint on your own self at times, is important. If someone is pinging you at an odd hour, first of all, that person trusts you that you're going to hear him or her out. That's why he's pinging you. And for you to be available is super important. Manage that, and how do you create that kind of an equation with individual that they are able to reach out to you, and if they reach out to you, once they start reaching out to you, be available is the third one. Those are the three things which I can call out right now, Sandy. It's still work in progress, very much work in progress. We all are learning, but yeah, those are the three things I can share purely from personal experiences.
Yeah, and I love the be available, and I think, and you can set ground rules for that. You can say, okay, from I don't know, 9 p.m.
Yeah.
until 7 or 8 a.m. the next morning, please don't contact me unless it's really, really, really urgent. I mean, if it's
Yeah.
really urgent, then by all means contact me. But make sure that you get a chance to unwind yourself as an HRBP, obviously, and and try to connect. Mostly be observant and try to connect mostly at a time that's convenient for them. So if there's one person that says, okay, I have a newborn at home, so I'm always up, and then my husband is taking care of the baby or whatever. So that's 7 in the morning is a good time. And for someone else, 9 in the evening or 8 in the evening might be a much better time to
Right.
really be able to connect with one another. So be observant. I think that's one of the most beautiful things I heard today. Just be observant. Make sure you notice what's going on and notice the changes. And all right, thank you so much for that, Saurabh. I think we're out of time. I'm sorry, we have other questions, but we'll save them for one of the live sessions. The People Matters BeNext program on the HRBP in the new world of work will be very beneficial, obviously, for leaders and companies that are just getting started with redesigning and reskilling HR to an open hybrid workforce approach, but also for those that have already started implementing changes. Like Sarup said, everything's a work in progress. We're never done. And so if you want some guidance in reconfiguring the organization to foster strategic relationships, manage stakeholders' expectations, and help evolve people practices and address the needs of the business and shifting values in our cultures, you're very welcome to join us. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Sarup, for that wonderful conversation. Your thoughts have been truly inspiring, give us a lot to reflect upon. We realize that there's been a lot of change and there will be plenty more. But if you want to join us for this certified program, please, I think one of my teammates is going to put a link in the chat so you can sign up if you want. We have other brilliant programs coming up as well. Take a look at those. This one starts September 20th. If you enjoyed this webcast, I can assure you, you will love the full program. That both me and Sarup will be on, by the way. And we have so much more we want to share with you. So we truly hope you will take this journey with us. And let us know if you have any questions. Thank you so much for your time. Please stay safe, stay healthy, be kind to one another. And until we meet again, guys. Thanks, Sarup.
Thank you, Cindy.